Up next, we've got Adam Needles with ANNUITAS. Adam,
Yes.
thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Cool. And so I understand ANNUITAS is a bit of a consultancy, is that correct?
Yeah, so we do consulting work from a management consulting standpoint. We do consulting work with large B2B sales and marketing organizations. And the goal is to really help them transform what we call their demand process. So really thinking about their people, process, content, technology, all of the things that go into driving revenue, all that go into driving and engaging with their buyer. And really the transformation, we're in a world today where we see buyers really disintermediating how they interact with companies, right?
Totally.
But a lot of companies are playing catch up because they've got very old models where it's very heavy sales forces, it's not smart on digital intelligence. So we help them go through a transformation to say, how do you align your content, your lead management process, your tech stack, your insights and data, and your organizational design to be built around the buyer and to really power that buyer's decision making, and through that process to better deliver higher level and more consistent level of customer lifetime value and revenue. So we're helping companies that identify their problems, build a strategy for how to really construct a demand process, go through that transformation, but then in the process of that, and I know you and I were talking about this a little bit before we started rolling here, in the process of that, we want them to start to build a real discipline around what we call demand process KPIs. So what are the things that they should be looking at to look at the health of their demand process at those people, process, content, technology layers? And that's where Tableau plays a really critical role, because for us, that's how we actually provide dashboards and extend those insights to our customers on an ongoing basis to be able to see how they're performing.
That sounds like you're like right at the middle of a Venn diagram of a lot of things that are evolving, and maybe the clients, like you said, even identifying what the issue is. What would you say of that, the people, process, and technology, which part of that is the hardest piece to solve?
So our clients regularly come at it and say, well, I don't have closed loop, or I'm not getting the most out of my market automation or my CRM. So the pain point that we hear is in fact that they're not getting what they need out of the technology or the analytics side. But in fact, when we dig in, what we see over and over again is that it's not a data issue, it's not a technology issue, it's that the way they built campaigns, the way they built content, the way they manage their funnel is in fact actually disconnected. And so, how often is it people blame data or they blame technology for their woes, but in fact, there's actually a substantive fix. And there's also organizational gaps, right? So we regularly see, we always talk about sort of the common life cycle of an engage, nurture, convert, right? So really basic concept. Well, a lot of companies spend a lot of dollars engaging and they want to convert, but they often have gaps in the nurture stage, and they often, you look at their org design and say, okay, there's a bunch of people who have jobs that are like PR and advertising events to like engage with someone, and there's a lot of people calling on the phone, but like who nurtured in between, right? And so you go in there and you fix those substantive gaps, and then you start to lay out a new architecture. One of the other things that we note, and I sometimes refer to as sort of atomizing, so when we look at the buyer journey and look at all the points of interaction, the campaigns, the content, we want to be able to sort of atomize those interactions, because what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to dig in and do point analysis to see critical path. So what were the content pieces that an average person who is a success and actually becomes closed won, what's the average process that they go through whenever they're consuming content? Right. What is the average sequence and timeline? How quickly they move through that process. We want to be able to measure what we call two things: elasticity in terms of the content offer consumption, and velocity. And we use elasticity to say, okay, if they consume X content piece and it says, our analytics say 4.5% of the time they turn into close one. Well, that's actually a pretty good indicator, right? Because a lot of times the numbers are sub one, right? And then the other thing is we look at and say, well, if we were to lay out everything that's got, an elasticity 1% or higher or whatever the threshold is, and we look at the dates of consumption and we subtract that back from the actual date of closed one, what you can start to build is a picture of, okay, well, they did this one, then this one, then this one, then this one. All this is theoretical from a KPI standpoint, except when you have Tableau, which enables us to really power and dig in. And we do some really cool visualizations where we look at those elasticities and that digital critical path, and Tableau literally puts together the steps and is calculating every single little piece of that. And so for us, it's like we preach to our customers, you got to build it this way so that you can measure it this way, but you've got to have the gridiron to actually be able to do that. And that's where we've been, this is what we've been talking a lot with some of the Tableau staff, giving feedback and interacting on what we're doing. And I think, for me, without Tableau, without that engine, we wouldn't be able to show those insights.
And I bet that's a really big battle that you fight as well. Like I said, with all the evolution and things changing, and some folks may have become the social media manager because they didn't have somebody else, and they don't really understand how to deal with all this data deluge. They're coming up to speed on it themselves. They're not a digital native.
Yep.
Do you find yourself doing a lot of sort of helping people understand the underlying impacts, and finding Tableau can help? Show you can pull the data in and tell them, like, look, people are sharing your posts or people are talking about this.
One of the things that really struck me this morning, the CEO and founder of Tableau really talking about the democratization of insights, and the whole idea is that Tableau's mission is really get insights in more people's hands. And it's fascinating that when people have insights, they're driven to action, to change, right? And so we see constantly from a sales and marketing standpoint, when B2B marketers, which is what we primarily interact with, when they actually have these insights in hand at a sales and marketing level, it can completely change how they operate. What's interesting, you talk about digital natives, we see, particularly in the consumer world, a lot of really strong digital natives and marketers, but we see a lot of reticence in the B2B arena to really catch up. I mean, there's some outliers. There's people like Joe Rowley are out there talking about social selling. There's some outliers that are really starting to help B2B think in a different way, but it's surprising how many financial services, healthcare, industrial segments that have old B2B sales-led models. You have marketers who are expected to just put together enablement literature and run events, when what they should be doing is taking all this digital engagement, that atomized buyer behavior, and feeding that into a score, a qualification, a process, so you're perpetually seeing where your buyers are, you're flagging the ones that have potential, you're nurturing them forward, and you're seeing that cross-channel. And I think that's the other piece that we see. Frequently, organizations are engaging in things like nurturing, and they make that synonymous just with email, right?
Yep.
Or they're heavily into one digital channel, but they're not federating across all of them. One of the key things that we try to enable is for, through marketing automation, CRM, for all those platforms to bring the data together, and then again, from the Tableau standpoint, to then analyze that to see that journey not only cross-content piece, but also cross-channel.
Right, so if I'm hearing you right, you're saying the technology is not that difficult. The technology is the easiest part of the whole machine. It's getting people to understand everything that they have and helping them to bring it all together into one unified view.
I'm sure there's no technology vendor CEO out there who wants me to admit this, but the technology already exists to do all of this stuff. It's all about how you set it up. But I will say that, and I'm a really big believer in Tableau. As a consulting group, we actually moved over to Tableau about 1.5 years ago.
Cool.
Prior to that, we had separate BI initiatives. We were pivoting data. There's a lot of other ways that we were delivering the insights. But we didn't find anything that could have the combination of visualization and then also the actual analytical gridiron, the statistical, all that working together to do the calculations to see that level. So the technology, that like the engine is there to do the work and capture the data, but the visualization layer, there's a lot of organizations out there that are digging into or trying to provide to sales and marketing professionals, hey, you just plug this into your marketing automation, you get this great insight.
Right.
It's not the case. You got to do some work, right?
Absolutely.
And so I don't find. Sometimes when you watch the keynote or a Tableau demo, everybody's like, oh, you just drag and drop, it's so easy,
you
right?
You got to have the domain knowledge of what to drag and drop,
Right, it's not easy, right?
Yeah.
You need to know what are the questions you're asking, what are the answers you're trying to get.
Absolutely.
But you've got to have the right platform to enable you to do that. So I don't look at it as Tableau. One of the developers was talking about it's all easy peasy, right? It's not easy peasy, but I do appreciate that Tableau comes to the stage with the right kind of platform to actually enable you to do that. So like you've got to still ask the tough questions, and that's the other thing that the CEO was talking about this morning is the idea that they want to enable the people who know how to ask their questions,
right,
who aren't necessarily the quant jocks, aren't the analytical jocks,
yep,
but the people that know the questions to drive that. And I think that's a key part of what we've been doing. We've got an analytics group that enables the dashboarding and supports,
cool,
but it's fundamentally led by our strategy organization and the KPIs they've established for our clients. And that's the same thing we're trying to do in our client sites, which is enable these frontline CMOs, heads of marketing operations, heads of demand gen, to be asking the questions, to be digging in and doing the analysis, and not make it a technological barrier.
Very cool. And I'd imagine you guys are in the nice position that when you get into a company, all the ground is just fertile. You know, all the pieces are there. They just need that last little bit.
Don't tell our clients that.
I won't tell them. I won't tell your clients
No,
that.
it's a
but
life
the connector,
cycle.
the glue,
It's a
is
life
really
cycle.
important.
Yeah, transformation is a life cycle. So it's like if you're going down a maturity path, that's a multi-year event. And from our standpoint, we try to drive and be a catalyst for the initial change, get them on the right path, but then we provide that ongoing coaching. And yeah, we have longer term relationships with our clients, because as they mature and improve, there's always, how do you go to the next level?
Right.
And we even see that from a KPI standpoint. There are basic KPIs around being able to see your end-to-end funnel, to being able to see at a basic level what channels are performing well and for what reason. When you've got that basic level, when I talk about like content velocity and content elasticities, that's like a tier 2 or 3 analytic.
Sure.
We want to get our clients to that level.
Sure.
But like you said earlier, the data's there. You just need to start analyzing it and measuring it in a way that's usable so that you can actually tune your programs. And then take a step back. That also means that you need to build your programs in a way to make it analyzable. And I think that's the one other thing. There's this whole big data thing that's been going on. I think IBM is sort of like a big perpetrator of the giant lie, which is you cannot plug in any analytics product to any data source and get anything out of it. Garbage in, garbage out, right?
Sure.
So we talk about, if you want to do demand process optimization, you need to come at it with a structured process, and then you need to come at it with structured analytics. And if you don't build what you want to measure in a meaningful way, it's hard to measure it and analyze it. But if you build it in a meaningful way, you're going to do it like over the top in terms of your opportunity to actually analyze, find opportunities for improvement. I use the analogy, anybody who runs a factory, right? They set up all their sensors and measurements to measure very specific things, right?
Yep.
They don't just have some random computer saying, hey, what are the machines doing? Let's analyze it
Try
later,
this
right?
one.
Right? Nobody would build a factory that way. Why would you build your supply chain or your demand process or anything you do as a company in anything other than a structured way? If you do that, you at least have a base level hypothesis you can measure and actually test and take it to the next level.
Absolutely. And what do you suppose is like the root cause? This is a really interesting conversation. I love that, because I see the same thing, like folks coming in and not looking at their big data picture from a holistic view. They're thinking, oh, they're going to plug this thing in over here into the machine. The machine stays static. What is the biggest cause there? What if a company is in that mode and they're having a tough time getting out of it? How can they? What's the crowbar that they can use to open it up and inject that philosophy into everything? Yeah.
So I think that there's a couple things. The first one is they get so many messages from vendors that tell them that their data is worth something, and it's not worth anything, right? We typically go in, and here's the statistic. We will typically do analysis of active contacts in, for instance, a market automation database, and we find frequently that maybe 2% are engaged and usable, right? And so most of their data is complete crap. So I think step one, they've got to get over that. But step two, what happens is that I think that there's a need for people to understand that there's a certain level of structure you want to provide to your data that's meaningful. Like for instance, instead of a title for a contact that you're trying to target, let's try and put them in a structured persona category, right? Instead of having just open questions, let's have like pull downs and drop boxes that mean something, right?
Yep.
I think too often people ask a lot of open-ended questions. And this is sort of lawyers will tell you this, right? No lawyer in a courtroom is ever going to ask a question they don't know the answer to, right? I think marketers and salespeople need to learn that when they talk about their data. If they're on a form, if they're trying to structure their data, have stuff that's meaningful that they can action on. But see, to do that, you have to take a step back to say, how am I going to use this data? And so I think that the primary step, once you get over this garbage that your unstructured data is meaningful, you need to wipe this slate clear for a minute and say, how am I going to run campaigns? How am I going to run my events? How am I going to run my demand process? What are the core 2 or 3 or 4 things I need to know? Persona is a critical one, right? Basic buying indicators, right, around timeline. These are things you need to route people into proper buying stage kind of nurtures. Like, is it sort of an earlier stage interest, a later stage? But you need to think through that and then go in and design your form strategy, your field strategy to support what it is that you're going to do with it. I think if you take that precursor step, I don't mean to be long-winded about it, but if you take that precursor step and think about how you're going to use it, you're going to get much more structured and meaningful data on the back end.
Absolutely. And what if you can look back in your past, and you can obviously get client names, but it'd be nice to hear like your couple of your biggest success stories around your like holistic data-driven approach that you guys take. Yeah.
So one of our biggest success stories is PR Newswire, and we've done a lot of public case studies on them, so it's okay for me to say this, but Ken Winko, their CMO, Bob Seiler, their head of sales, brought us in about 2 years ago, went through a top to bottom transformation, included significant organizational change, technology restructuring their entire way they campaign, and then restructuring how sales and marketing work together. And we tackled their transactional segment first, so they're sort of high volume, high velocity. That was a great way to get things going and to prove the case early on. And then we've subsequently tackled their larger, big relationship selling, and now we're moving on to customer lifecycle. So what happens post-sale and really starting to build out. The program is highly NPV positive, and every day, every week, their inside, their inbound, their field sales are getting a significant lift. We've seen running for 2015, it's providing a lift in the 8 to 10% range in terms of total lift. And you know this concept of local linearity, that's hard to see a trend after a couple months. Well, after running the thing now for well over a year, what's interesting is you can almost put a shoe wedge in their closed won chart, and it's starting to do this, and you're really seeing that lift, and we're starting to see close rates increasing from the sales team. So that's been a real success story. I think another one worked with Newell Rubbermaid with one of their industrial units, and their biggest challenge was that they were so product-centric they didn't know how to engage with the executives in this space. And we've been able to cause them to restructure their conversation tracks, to get their salespeople in earlier in the process. And now instead of just talking to somebody who is at a mill, whose saw blade's going out and like, hey, we need to replace this, a little bit late in the game to be having a conversation. Now they're actually earlier in the process talking to people who make capital equipment purchase decisions, who actually make decisions about what's on their shop floor, thinking about the bigger costly, the bigger equation in terms of dollars and cents. So those are two examples, but we're seeing this change going on in industrial segments, in financial services, and healthcare and technology. Those are the big B2B areas that are fundamentally transforming. And in those segments, we see legacy sales teams that are like, hey, I'm having trouble engaging with the modern buyer. It seems like they're not calling me as much. Marketing, I need some help. We're getting in there time after time, making a change in how they campaign, how sales and marketing interact, and then how their technology and org supports that. And we're seeing a big change in terms of being able to move to finally a perpetual, literally leads, opportunities, closed ones coming out of the pipeline every day. Not just like this month or this quarter.
Little chunks, right? Yeah, and it is more of an incremental, multi-month, multi-year process, I think.
And you want to, for us, we started talking about demand process. For us, the telltale sign of a consistent demand process is consistent results. Not like this, but like you're starting to see a smoothing of the line. And that's what the CEO and the head of sales wants to see in the CFO, right? They want to actually predict, okay, not only do we have a nice revenue line, but it's kind of going up, and if I put more in here and I tune it in this way, that's going to continue to increase.
That is really cool. And out of all the tool set, I'm sure that you pick from a whole plethora of, you mix a unique cocktail for every client of technology and processes and so forth. Like, how would you rate Tableau in all of the tools as, you're the one that the clients get the biggest bang out of the buck for? Yeah, I think from a visualization standpoint, it's definitely in the top. I would give it probably 8 or 9 out of 10. I would say in terms of its ability to do complex calculations and to be easy to set up those calculations, definitely an 8 or 9, definitely in the upper 8 to 10 range. I would say the one area where Tableau still is evolving, they're newer to Mac. We have a bunch of consultants who are out there who are on Macs, right? And so newer to Mac, newer to working with tablets and phones. I think there's a lot of consistent investment, so I would give them an A for effort, but there's definitely a need to harness that power better. The compute power on Macs is really kind of lacking right now, so they need to do a better job of harnessing the actual native processing power.
So I think that that's a piece. And I think the last piece of it is they've made some strides with Tableau Public and with Tableau Online. And we're a customer of Tableau Online. All of our customers that dial into looking at their dashboards they're doing on Tableau Online.
Yep.
So we definitely are seeing an improvement there. But the performance of Tableau Online, the ability for people to use it and to actually the end user to make adjustments and to sort of do things that are meaningful and make take a pre-formed dashboard, but then customize it to their own needs. I think there's some usability improvements to make there.
Did you catch the keynote this morning? Did any of that kind of fill in the gaps of what you were talking about?
So
like
there
the
was
content
no
management
announcements
piece
on Tableau Online. Right,
Okay.
It was all about Tableau Server.
That's
right.
true. That's true.
So we feel like, and we're having ongoing conversations with the Tableau Online product folks. We feel like they're making the right strides, but I think that the least enabled, the least strongest usable part of the mix is actually Tableau Online. And in fact, in a high multi-tenant environment, which is what we operate within,
Sure.
the most critical piece is in fact that access point. So we see, I think they're making the right strides and moving in the right direction. But I think that they definitely have some development work to do to really make that a strongest, it's not the strongest product in the portfolio today.
Cool. Well, hopefully they're going to watch this and listen to your feedback, and we'll see an announcement next
Happy
year.
to give you guys all the feedback you want.
Awesome. Adam, thank you so much for
Thank
taking
you
the
so
time.
much.
We're a bit over.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you taking the time out of here. Are you speaking, or do you have any engagements at the conference?
I'm just in and out today.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be seeing you around. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cool. Take care.